Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the 1977 Formula One season and what made it better than just a quick glance at the championship standings would make you think it was. Before getting into it though, if you enjoyed the video then please give it a like and share it, and also for more similar content then subscribe to the channel. Now on to 1977. So, throughout Formula One's history, there have been many seasons in which the driver's champion clinched the title well before the last race, ruining any hope of an exciting title decider right to the end of the season. Many of these happen because one of the teams produced an outstanding car, with one of their drivers putting the wonderful car they've been given to its best use to dominate the season. If you were to stumble across the 1977 season in the history books, you would probably think that it was one of these dominant seasons. You would see that Niki Lauda won the championship by 17 points over Jody Scheckter, or with today's point system 49 points, meaning just about 2 full races, and with an even deeper look, you'd find he did this without even driving in the final 2 races after a disagreement with his Ferrari team. Surely you'd not have to look much further to know that Lauda put on a dominant display throughout the year, and no one else was able to touch him. You would also probably be able to safely assume that Lauda led the season in stats such as win, poles, lap sled, and perhaps even fastest laps. If you did take a deeper look, though, it would probably be shocking to find out that he did not lead the 1977 season in any of these statistics. Instead, he only tied for the second most wins, had the third most poles, and only the fourth most laps led in the season in which he comfortably won the title. How exactly did he manage to do this then? As it turns out, the season was actually quite competitive, and in some ways perhaps one of the most competitive in Formula One history. With everything considered, is it possible that the 1977 season was the best season in which there was a runaway champion? Let's look further into it. One of the season's best stories started right at the beginning of the year at the season opener in Argentina. Jody Scheckter, driving for the Wolf team, qualified 11th and didn't look to be a main contender for the win. However, Scheckter had a much better day on race day and slowly climbed through the field through a combination of speed and misfortune of others. As the race was entering its closing stages, Scheckter found himself catching the Brabham of Carlos Pache, and with 6 laps to go, Scheckter made a pass for the lead, which became a win. This was interesting enough, as a driver that qualifies outside the top 10 doesn't win often, but there was something else about it that made it even more interesting. The owner of Wolf Racing, Walter Wolf, had invested in Frank Williams racing cars for 1976, but after a disappointing season, the two went their separate ways, with Williams establishing a new team that we now know as Williams, which would go on to be one of the sport's dominant teams through the 80s and 90s, while Wolf re-established his team as Walter Wolf Racing. This means that Schecter's win gave Wolf Racing a win on debut. Basically, this started out like Braun GP over 30 years before Braun GP existed. Given that some of the main contenders retired and Scheckter qualified 11th, it looked like this may have been just a fluke win, but as it turns out, it was not. After a difficult race in Brazil, Scheckter was one of the main contenders the rest of the season. He qualified in the top 5 for 9 of the season's 17 races, including a pole in Germany, and finished in the top 5 9 times as well, including further wins in Monaco and the team's home race in Canada. He even led the championship for much of the first half of the year, and as late as after round 8 in Sweden, and would go on to finish the championship in second behind Lauda. For a new team to accomplish this, especially one that just ran a single car in Scheckter, was an amazing achievement and a great story to be able to follow through the season. Schecter's 3 wins were tied with Lauda and James Hunt for the second most wins of any driver that season, but there are also plenty of other winners as well. Over the 17 races, 8 different drivers won a race, which falls just short of the 11 different winners in 1982 and 9 different winners in 1975 for the most winners in a season, and also matched the 8 different winners of 1983, 1985, 2003, and 2012. These 8 different winners also came across 6 different teams, which is only short of the 7 different teams that won in 1882. With numbers like this, there seems to have been quite a bit of parity at the front of the field, with many different drivers and teams that are capable of winning throughout the year. On top of that, there are also others who could have easily won throughout the year as well, most notably John Watson of Brabham, who led 138 laps during the season but failed to win a race. Among these winners were some other good stories outside of Wolf. In Belgium, Gunnar Nilsson scored his first and only career win after overtaking Lauda in a chaotic wet-dry race, and the race after that, Jacques Laffite took a surprise first win for both himself and the Ligier team in Sweden. Ligier was another young single-car team which debuted in 1976 and had shown some promise near the year and a half, but taking a win when they did was still a surprise. There is even one more first-time winner which came in Austria. This one was future world champion Alan Jones, whose win was also the only one for the Shadow team. Shadow joined Formula One in 1973 and was mostly a midfielder, although there were a few wins that got away mixed in there. By 1977, though, the team looked like they were on a decline to their eventual demise in 1980. Like Nilsson's win, the win for Jones came in a chaotic wet-dry race which started out damp and then dried out. Jones only started in 14th, but had made it up to second by lap 16 and would move into the lead late when the McLaren of James Hunt had an engine failure. Between the wins of Scheckter in Argentina and Jones in Austria, 1977 is the only season in Formula One history in which multiple races have been won by drivers that started outside the top 10. On top of the first-time winners, there are also quite a few races with exciting endings. In Long Beach, Scheckter led away from the start, and while he never built up a huge lead, it was enough that he looked to be in control for most of the race. However, in the latter stages, he started developing a slow puncture which brought Mario Andretti close enough to challenge him for the lead. Andretti was looking for a way by for a while, and with 4 laps to go, he finally found a way to take the lead of the race and become the only American driver to win a World Championship race in the United States, excluding the Indianapolis 500. Scheckter, on the other hand, still held on for third as he was also passed by Lauda in the closing laps. Lafitte's first win in Sweden also came after late drama, and this time it was Andretti on the losing end of it. After starting 8th, Lafitte dropped to 12th at the start and slowly climbed his way through the field until he made it up to second on lap 41. He didn't look like he could challenge Andretti, but with 4 laps to go, Andretti had to pit because of a fuel metering problem, handing the lead to Lafitte. Andretti, on the other hand, would still manage a 6th-place finish. The race after Sweden and France also had late drama. Watson led Andretti for most of the race, but Andretti was looking to pass Watson in the closing stages. He was looking for a way by on the last lap, and Watson suffered a brief misfire which allowed Andretti the small moment he needed to go on and win a race in which he only led the last lap. Another late lead change occurred in Canada, and once again it involved Andretti. Andretti dominated much of the race, but with 3 laps to go, he had to retire with engine failure, allowing Scheckter to take the win. On top of these races with late drama, there were other interesting races, including the aforementioned Belgian and Austrian Grand Prix in wet, dry conditions. Belgium also saw a collision on the first lap between front-row starters Andretti and Watson, forcing them both to retire, making it the first time the entire front row retired on the opening lap of a race, and it has only happened 3 times since, occurring in 1990 Japan, 2016 Spain, and 2017 Singapore. 1977 has some other things going forward as well. It seems like one of the main criticisms about previous eras in Formula One is that the gaps from the front of the field to the back were quite a bit larger than they are today, and while in many cases that is true, for much of 1977 it was not. If you look at qualifying for some of the races in 1977, you would see many cases of a close field. In South Africa, the top 18 were separated by 1.5 seconds, the top 15 separated by 1.4 seconds in Sweden, and the top 24 separated by 3 seconds, the top 22 separated by 2.2 seconds in France, and 27 cars within 3 seconds of each other, which included 5 drivers who did not qualify. The top 26 drivers were separated by 3 seconds in Austria and Netherlands, and 23 cars separated by 2.7 seconds in Japan. 2 of the closest qualifying sessions may have been at the Italian and British Grand Prix, though. In Italy, only 24 cars were allowed to start, and the 24th and last starter, Patrick Neve, was within 2.4 seconds of pole, and when you go into the cars that did not qualify down to 30th, was still within 3.1 seconds of pole. Britain was even closer, though. Neve was once again the last starter with 26 drivers starting this race, and he was only 1.8 seconds off the pole time set by James Hunt. Further down, Alex Ribeiro was the 27th fastest qualifier at 1.9 seconds off pole, but with only 26 cars allowed to start, he was not able to do so. That means that setting a time less than 2 seconds off the pole was too slow to start the race. Looking at these, it shows that the field is quite close together, and it's no wonder we saw some parity throughout the grid during the year. There are also some other interesting storylines throughout 1977, including the debut of impressive young Canadian Gilles Villeneuve at the British Grand Prix, who would go on to be one of the most revered drivers in Formula One history, but there was also another curiosity making its debut in Britain. The rules at the time allowed for a 3-liter normally aspirated engine or 1.5-liter turbocharged engines, but no one had ever explored the turbocharged route. That was until Renault. Renault made their team debut in Britain and did so with the first ever turbo engine on a World Championship grid. The team struggled initially and didn't really start being competitive until 1979. While no one probably knew it that day, it was the first appearance of a car that would start a revolution throughout the sport for the next decade. As I said at the start, the dominant champion Lauda did not lead the season in either wins, poles, or lap sled. Andretti was the one who ended up leading in all three of these categories instead, but could not convert points anywhere near the rate that Lauda could. The main reason for this was an unreliable and at times inconsistent Lotus car that was experimenting with another revolution. In their case, it was ground effects. Everything would come together though in 1978 for Andretti and Lotus, but 1977 was just a year too early for them to maximize their potential. Between the Lotus and Renault, 1977 saw two revolutions that would define the next era of the sport. When looking at everything, it seems that 1977 was quite a bit more interesting than a quick glance at the championship standings would suggest. The other drivers competing with Lauda could not score points at a rate anywhere near as consistently as he did. The best way Lauda did this was through being reliable. During the year, Lauda only retired 2 times, while closest competitors Scheckter and Andretti retired 7 times each. For comparison, Lauda's teammate Reutemann retired 4 times, while many others were in the range of Scheckter's and Andretti's 7 retirements. This was obviously a different era in which the cars were nowhere near as reliable as they are today, so Ferrari's work to build a car that was as reliable as it was clearly paid off, as in pure speed they were probably not the fastest and were only instead in a mix of cars capable of winning. I think there's both positives and negatives of unreliability being greater than it is today, but I do think it was one of the reasons that made 1977 a much more interesting year than the standings would suggest. Lauda himself, though, was also a very smart driver who was consistent in his own right, that was often able to get more or less than many of the others that competed in the championship as well. It shows, though, that sometimes you don't have to be the fastest, and instead just have the ability to maximize your potential. Now, of course, when watching the season, and I'm sure many of you would most like to see a close championship fight down to the end, and obviously 1977 was lacking that. Unfortunately, those close seasons can't happen every year, and in the years that they don't, I'd be perfectly fine seeing a year like 1977 every time. That's all I have for you on 1977 today. Hopefully you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments if you have any memories of the season, and if you agree that it was the best year that had a runaway champion. If not, which other ones did you think were great as well? I'd be interested to know what you think. Thanks for watching.